Jaguar Health is a commercial stage pharmaceuticals company that is listed on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol JAGX. Jaguar Health's family of companies include Napo Pharmaceuticals, Napo Therapeutics, and they focus on developing novel, sustainably sourced plant-based prescription medicines for gastrointestinal distress. And with me is CEO Lisa Conte. Great to have you back, and I'm looking forward to the update on the company. It just released your earnings report. Tell me about that, what was relevant, and what was the important pieces of that release?
Oh, thanks, Shannon. I'm thrilled to be back. And thanks so much. Yeah, it was an extraordinary earnings release this year on three fronts. I call it the robustness release. Robustness in three categories: financially, our product development pipeline, and also our upcoming commercial launches. Financially first, what everybody wants to know, it's an earnings release. Our net sales increased 16% for the second quarter of 2024 over the first quarter. It was about $2.72 million. That is primarily our human-approved product, Mytesi. The active ingredient is crofelemer. It's approved for HIV-related diarrhea. There are some animal sales in there as well, including crofelemer under the brand name Canalevia, conditionally approved for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs. And HIV-related diarrhea, Canalevia, these are specialty markets. They're relatively small markets. But what's important with the growth is it shows our ability to communicate, to educate, to promote a novel mechanism of action, a paradigm-shifting way of normalizing gut function, which is sort of the prelude of where we're going with crofelemer for other indications.
Mm-hmm. And when you say robustness, are you talking about the pipeline, and what exactly do you mean by that?
So the clinical pipeline, what I mean with robustness there is we also reported benefit in three different clinical investigations. So first of all, crofelemer is approved for HIV-related diarrhea under an analysis that broadly I will term a responder analysis. It's basically a proportion of patients who respond, who have formed stools versus those that don't for a diarrhea indication. In this earnings release, we also reported results for a recently completed phase 3 clinical trial for crofelemer for cancer therapy-related diarrhea. Now, this was a big, bold, ambitious study that enrolled patients with all different solid tumors. There were 10 different solid tumor types on targeted therapy. Targeted therapies are those therapies that patients are on for months or years, metastatic patients indefinitely for the rest of their lives. To live, they're remarkable, to live with cancer as a chronic situation. Metastatic patients are living for 5, 10, 15 years. We included in our study 24 different targeted therapies that have more than a 50% rate of diarrhea. They could be on or off traditional cytotoxic chemotherapy, and it was a prophylactic study. Now, we missed the primary endpoint. We have to own that. However, in two prospectively defined subgroups of lung cancer patients and cancer patients, two of the most common cancer diagnoses, particularly with many targeted therapy options, we demonstrated with robustness benefit in those patients. So in the responder analysis, which shows the robustness in the continuity of the responder analysis from HIV to cancer. And we also reported results from two investigator-initiated trials with subpopulations of irritable bowel syndrome, one from Harvard and one from University of Texas that we supported, that were accepted for posters at the American Gastroenterology Society. I think the meeting is in October in Philadelphia, again, with a responder analysis. So those are clinical results that are in the public domain, and we have upcoming clinical trials, 5 different clinical efforts going forward with crofelemer in our rare disease program of short bowel syndrome with intestinal failure and a congenital diarrheal disease, MVID, with intestinal failure.
What are the short-term catalysts for short bowel syndrome, and why are those important?
So short bowel syndrome with intestinal failure in the common situation with patients who have MVID, again, a category of congenital diarrheal disease. Intestinal failure means these patients don't have the opportunity to absorb the nutrients of life. With short bowel syndrome, they don't have enough surface area, your proteins, your carbs, etc. So often these patients end up on parenteral nutrition, IV nutrition, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Absolutely catastrophic for these patients. And there's no standard of care therapeutic treatment. The parenteral nutrition is their standard of care. There is a product out there with a mechanism that is essentially a growth hormone, a GLP-2 analog, and products in the pipeline. However, these products have limitations. It's a growth hormone. You can't use it in a patient who has cancer or at risk of some abnormal hyperproliferative disease. So what we're looking to do in these patients is to decrease the secretions a bit such that they have some opportunity to absorb the nutrients of life more efficiently and decrease the time that they're on what is a very toxic treatment, which is parenteral nutrition. We have 2 investigator-initiated efforts that should read out results just about the end of this year, 2024, into the beginning of 2025, and 2 global clinical trials, one for short bowel syndrome with intestinal failure, one for MVID, which will put first patients in before the end of this year. And here's what's really a wonderful opportunity for patients in Europe anyway, with published proof of concept data from, for example, our investigator-initiated results at the end of this year, and ongoing phase 2 initiatives. The results of that could result in early patient access, reimbursed early patient access in Europe, a program that does not exist in the United States, while the products complete the clinical program for these rare disease indications. And we do have orphan drug designation in Europe and the US, both for short bowel syndrome and for MVID. And these trials, because they're rare diseases, are occurring on a global basis, both in the Mideast or all in the Mideast, Europe, and the United States. So it's very exciting.
And when you talk about robustness of commercialization, so what do you mean by that exactly?
That is also incredibly exciting. We are getting ready to launch in October our 3rd prescription approved product called Gelclair, and it's for oral mucositis. And in particular, where we're focusing right now is in cancer patients. It's about 40% of cancer patients will suffer from oral mucositis, but in head and neck radiation patients, in bone marrow transplant patients, you're talking about north of 90% of patients are going to suffer from oral mucositis, and in many, many cases, therefore interfering with what can be successful cancer treatment. So let me give you a feel for what this is, because I had an adverse reaction due to COVID in 2022, and I got grade 4 oral mucositis. So oral mucositis, firsthand experience here. It's like broken glass in your mouth all day long, immense pain with a habanero pepper. You can't talk, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't even open your mouth. You have so many wounds. And because of that, you often end up, whatever therapy you're on, if you were a cancer patient, for example, you often end up going off that cancer therapy while you're waiting to heal. So what they give you, and what I got, was something called magic mouthwash, which is not so magic. It's basically lidocaine, and it just sort of dulls the pain for a minute or two. It's not lasting at all. And because you're numbed, you're like biting your cheek. It's terrible. What Gelclair does, it's a mucoadhesive, and when patients have it in their mouth and gargle with it, the word that just comes to mind is soothing, like and giving yourself therefore the opportunity to heal. And most importantly, where we're focusing with this focused launch into the cancer community, head and neck radiation, bone marrow transplant, allow them to stay on their therapy. So that's in October of this year. We're very excited.
Okay, you have lots of exciting things going on, Lisa. So I'm so glad that we had this update, and thanks for everything you're doing for people to make their lives easier.
Oh, thank you. And we'll continue to give you updates.
Yes, love to hear them.